Hello, I'm David Peacock, and welcome to the Future of Tourism podcast. 10 years ago in Ontario, Canada, I was tasked with creating a tourism development incubator to understand and address the changes we faced as destination organizations in the face of rapid globalization and pervasive digital disruption. Much of that work focused on A/B testing between traditional marketing and promotion activities and alternative investments in building stakeholder networks and improving members' digital competencies. At the same time, other key developments were happening in the industry. Destination Next shone a bright spotlight on the pressing need for meaningful and productive stakeholder engagement at the destination level. Jack Johnson and his team took it a step further and created a tourism lexicon that underlined the need for reorganizing around community shared values, maybe the single most pressing existential threat we face as destination organizations, especially in the lee of COVID-19. A month ago, on his DMO Pros podcast, when I was a guest, Bill Geist asked me when I was going to show some of the tools that we've been working on here at Simpleview. Well, today is that day, and my guest is, myself and my product manager, Alton Wells. Alton is a serial entrepreneur at heart and has worked on a number of digital startups since he left the University of Arizona in 2016. He joined Simpleview in 2019. Today, we'll look at two tools we've been developing at Simpleview: the Digital Influence Report, a holistic view of a destination's digital footprint across all stakeholder channels, and the Simpleview Reputation Management Tool, a powerful tool DMOs can use in partnership with their stakeholders and members to improve their digital assets, the accuracy of their listings, and the syndication of those listings across multiple channels. Good morning, Mr. Wells.
Hi, David. You make me sound so old.
So when you headed up the drone company, you weren't actually under 30. You were under 20, weren't you?
I started Apollo when I was 19, and then I left the company when I was 23. So yeah.
People don't really know you, but what they don't know is that you've been on every podcast since we started. You are by default, the producer of the Future Tourism podcast. And I will say to the listeners, in March, as we were pivoting to help deal with the crisis, Alton and I came up with a concept that the conversations we were having with CEOs and leaders around the world about the state of tourism and what tools and opportunities we needed next, we decided to have those conversations essentially publicly, and the Future Tourism podcast was born. And as I said, Alton is the producer on the Future Tourism podcast.
Yeah, which essentially means I just get to sit here, listen to David, talk to anybody else, and I just press the buttons. So it's not too bad of a gig.
Yeah, on a good day.
On a good day.
All right. Anything you want to add to your bio? I give them a little look at where you've been. As we're going to talk about the tools we've been developing, anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've been with Simpleview for a little over a year and a half. I joined in early 2019. I'm fairly new to travel and tourism, but I try to consider myself an astute student. And, I think that the tourism industry as a whole has a pretty remarkable opportunity to have a positive impact, not only on the general economy, but also on the small businesses that are dramatically impacted by COVID. And it's been a really exciting process to work on this project and to make I would say, pretty serious strides in helping shape the future of tourism. So I'm excited to share our work.
So let's dive right in and talk about the Digital Influence Report. The Influence Report is a very significant expansion on work that we were testing some 5 or 6 years ago, with the idea of looking at a destination and looking at the operators who make up the digital footprint of that destination. And if you think of a small to medium sized DMO in Canada or the US, usually they'll have a budget in the low single figure millions of dollars, and they'll probably have between 300 and 600 key stakeholders who make up the attributes that set that destination apart. When we first developed this idea of reporting on the footprint of a destination, we manually tabulated 100 data points per operator. So everything from, were they effectively listed on Google My Business, and was that a complete citation? Were there conflicting listings that we could find that gave out bad address information? Were they using imagery in their social feeds? Were they answering TripAdvisor reviews in a cogent and incredible way that built their reputation? We've come a long way in the last year in automating that report, haven't we?
Yeah, totally. So, I think you like to use the term that, it took a bunch of college students 3 or 4 weeks to produce this report by hand, which made me just feel really sad for those college students because data entry can be pretty monotonous. But when it comes to automating this report, yeah, I mean, we built an entire application for pulling down data on any number of stakeholders and small businesses in any region, checking their Google My Businesses, their Facebook accounts, their TripAdvisor accounts, looking into their general listing presence, seeing if they have a YouTube account. And we're even starting to expand to things like checking whether or not they have booking widgets, with the general idea being to follow the mantra of evaluating the digital presence of a single individual business and aggregating that to the general digital presence of a destination as a whole. So to answer your first question, I think we've made a lot of really good progress on automating the document, or on automating the digital influence report, and making it not only just a more reliable source of information, but for also like dramatically increasing the speed in which we can deliver this to customers. I think from a general, if you look at the equation, like how many painters does it take to paint a house, and it's like like that old school algebra equation when you're like in like middle school or something, or early elementary school. I think having a bunch of people trying to accumulate this data doesn't really scale well. It works really well for one destination, like the destination that you were managing in Aurora Fergus. That's a tenable model. But if you want to make these type of tools and resources available for an entire industry, obviously you need to use code. Obviously you need to use software, and you need to make it something that is reliable and repeatable. So that was one of the goals that we kind of looked to achieve.
So we're going to give the listeners a look at the digital influence report. If you're watching this as a video blog, we'll post some static screens that will show you what a digital influence report looks like. If you're on the Simpleview website, you'll be able to go to the blog post, and they'll be buried in there. If you're listening to this as the audio podcast, I encourage you to go to simpleviewinc.com blogs and look at the digital influence report and reputation management version to see the graphics that back this up. But let's talk for a minute then, assuming that our listeners can get a look at the report. Let's talk about why this is important. And this is something that is fundamentally changed in the last 5 years. We use now as a working destination definition as the modern destination brand is effectively the sum total of all the shared stories and experiences about a given destination across all platforms. That's the driving force behind the report. The idea that when you and I travel as consumers, when anyone travels as consumers, we now have a multiplicity of touch points that we can use to access a destination. The destination website's still incredibly important. I think of it as the Library of Congress of a destination, where it organizes its thinking, its ideas, and its records. But the truth of the matter is, we're finding sometimes as low as 1 in 10 visitors might land on that site, whereas the rest of them are picking up their mobile device, and it is generally a mobile device. 80% of devices used in tourism research are scoring as mobile, and in market that number jumps to 100% of devices as people collect things like people connect with things like Google Maps and look for amenities such as places to eat or things to do. So,
I think you bring up a good point. So, these technologies, these resources that people are using, I think the statistic, something like 70% of visitation to any given listing, right? If you can include the website, if you can include Google My Business, whatever it is, I think 70% is to a third party. So that means TripAdvisor, that means Google Maps, that means Yelp, that means any number of these kind of key technologies. So if you want to think about it from a marketing perspective, having good information, if you're to put out an advertisement and you're saying like, oh, we want to go to the West Coast of the United States, or come visit the West Coast of the United States, but you're marketing, I don't know, the coast of Florida, that's bad information. It's not actually accurate. And I think from the same perspective that for an individual business, the information that makes up their listings, the information that makes up the core data about their business. I think DMOs are already actively doing that in a sense. So if you think about what they're accomplishing with their websites, they spend an exorbitant amount of time cultivating listings, cultivating good information for their website, and it's only stored on their website. And so I think that there's a really easy logical jump to see that that information, that the core listings data that makes up these businesses can be found and should be accurate across all of these other resources.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit in the opening. I call that meeting the consumer where and how they shop. If the consumer wants to find you on Google, let them find you on Google. If you're a Foursquare aficionado, make sure then your business gets listed on Foursquare as well. If you're a TripAdvisor fan, then it makes perfect sense. That TripAdvisor is the place you go. It also gives us a role as DMOs to make sure those channels are effective. I mean, I can speak to you of one example we love to use for years, which is in a destination that was inside our regional group in Ontario for 3 years running. The number one attraction in that destination was a bowling alley that had been closed for 5 years.
Well, I think that's a good point. I would challenge or I'd encourage any listener who's kind of made this point to open their phone, ask the question, "Hey Siri," I can't say her name because there she is. "Hey Siri, what's the best place to eat in whatever town, whatever city you're in, or what's the best place to stay in whatever town or city that you're in?" And I think that if you look at those results, what we found is that a lot of destination marketers, a lot of destination managers, they don't agree with those results. I think, and if that data isn't being surfaced properly, those search engines, those algorithms, they're not going to find it. It's not going to be accurate. They're not going to know. So, I mean, small personal challenge for anyone listening. Seriously, like open your phone, ask that question, and tell us what you find. We would love to hear what your opinion was.
Well, and it is something that, as Alton and I are on the road making this presentation to DMOs and to their stakeholders and members, it is something we do in the room, and the results are always fun and exciting because guaranteed the best hotel in town generally raises people's eyebrows.
Well, there was a destination that we were at. We were giving a presentation, and it turns out like the best place to stay was like some super small inn, right off the beaten path. And the only reason that it was noted as the best place to stay was because it had the highest reviews. I think it had like 5 stars, and it had like 12 reviews. So the way that the algorithms work is they're like, oh, they have super high reviews, and they have a decent number of reviews. So I think it must have been like this, I can't remember the name of it, this small little town homestead where you can go in and sleep the night and like have apple pie for breakfast or something. That was the best place to stay. And everyone was like, we have like amazing world-class resorts. This is not entirely accurate.
Indeed. So we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're talking about reputation management. Let's close off the influence report here. Right. When a destination wants to engage and do a digital influence report, what does that process look like? And I think it's okay for us to talk about some places around the country that we're actually doing digital influence reporting and reputation management. But just before we get to all that, what's the process for a digital influence report?
Well, it's actually super simple, and it's very collaborative. So, you as destination marketers, as destination managers, like your destinations best. And so the first step before we can do really any report is to work directly with your team to come up with like a prioritized list of those top. We usually target between 200 or 300 stakeholders in your CRM, in your listings, whether you're a Simpleview customer or not. To get that information in the correct format so that we can pull and process the data. That way, it's not only an exercise where you've kind of handpicked the potential stakeholders that you want to work with to engage on any other programs outside of the digital influence report, outside of reputation management. And so, first steps first is you give us the data. We then go in, we process the data. We use the application that we built to process this information, and then we generate not only a report of your entire destination's digital presence, we also generate any number of individual business reports, which are actually very enlightening for your entire destination. So if you have 200 locations in the report, you're going to have 200 reports all hosted on a link, all hosted on on a download button where you can access and download the PDF to share and do whatever you want with. And inside of those reports, you have things like the individual listings presence. You have things like whether or not they're using analytics, whether or not they're using accessibility, whether or not they're using paid advertisements. Do they have a booking widget? How good is their website loading speed? So like those core measurements, those core KPIs for digital sophistication online, not only are you seeing it from like a holistic 50,000 foot perspective for your destination, but from like an individual 5 foot right here, right in your face perspective, you can say this business, this stakeholder has, this score and this is why. And I think that's very valuable.
Well, it's super valuable, and I think we need to sort of illuminate a couple points around that. One, I don't think we've ever been in a presentation where someone's hand hasn't gone up when the digital influence report is finally shown. And the influence report is an aggregate report for the destination. It's a grade for the entire destination across 200 or 300 stakeholders. But the question inevitably comes up from one of your member stakeholders: do I have a report card? And that's what Alton's talking about. Yes, every individual stakeholder has a report card. And I'm going to go back to one of those, most pressing issues we have as destination organizations in this day and age. It is that need for meaningful, ongoing, substantive relations with our stakeholders. DNext pointed it out in spades. There are only two axes in that study: destination strength and stakeholder engagement. And you cannot improve your destination without engaging stakeholders. You need to improve the funding you have, the bandwidth you have for change, the support you have. The digital influence report is a great place to start that. And one of the best things in it is the individual report card. I have yet to see an individual report card where no matter what it told the operator was grateful for the information and made immediate changes to improve their own digital fingerprint.
Well, you make a good point. So, the mantra, you talk a lot about stakeholder engagement. We've talked a lot about stakeholder engagement on the podcast. I know I say we, but I am there. I'm listening to all of them. It's hugely important for any DMO, for any destination organization moving into the future, to have more substantive relationships with the businesses and organizations that they represent in their region. And if you kind of think about it, the way that kind of like from first principles, the way that currently organizations interact is say, well, we have an advertising campaign. Oh, we're going to include, your business in maybe this video production. Maybe you're going to be included in the pamphlet or the brochure. And that's one level of interaction. So you're selling advertising, you're selling awareness. But I think with this information, with the tools that we've been working on, is you're not just selling awareness, you're not just selling advertising, but you're selling excellence. You're saying like, hey, we can verify and make sure that your business is exactly as you want it to be seen online in every way, which I know feeds into the second part of this, but with the digital influence report, you're able to target and see like, hey, here's where you as an individual business need to improve, and we can provide you with the resources to do so. And while that may not be a traditional mantra, it's a powerful tool for change. And I think in any organization that chooses to adopt like a more proactive approach to engaging with their stakeholders in the medium of the digital realm.
So let's assume as a destination, we've done a digital influence report. We've looked at our footprint. We see the weaknesses and strengths in the digital fingerprints of our members. What's next?
Well, it's kind of like you can take it from there. So, if you choose to be an organization that's very hands-on, we have destinations that we work with who have a lot of these processes built in already in place to engage with their stakeholders. I think there's a destination out there that we've spoken to that has like 30 or 40 or 50 Google Analytics tags that they manage and deployed on some of their key stakeholders' websites. So they're already managing kind of a very sophisticated level of information. You can take this information and just provide it to someone, but we also have a program that we've developed called, Simpleview Reputation Management, which enables you as a destination to sort of white label an entire portal for providing the services of listings and knowledge management to ensure the accuracy of this information that we've been talking about, to ensure and manage whether or not your stakeholders are responding to reviews, to analyze the sentiment of those reviews, and to get some really seriously powerful marketing analytics on how people are engaging with those core listings of the members or the stakeholders in your given region. So I think to answer your question simply, let's say we've run a report for any given destination. we work with you to come up with a customized solution to fit it to your needs, to fit it to your organizational structure, because we understand that your organization is unique, and we have to work within those boundaries to provide you with the resources to do what you can, to do your best.
So I think you make a really important point here, Alton. What you do next is really up to your organization, its capacity, and its structure. And as we are in recovery, and actually maybe even unfortunately not in recovery from COVID-19 as we face a second wave, it really is up to the individual destination as to how they structure this. And some living examples in Canada, a little destination called Laura Fergus, their response to the digital influence report was to open up a digital excellence center where the operators from the regional tourism office work one-on-one with stakeholders to improve their digital process. Back in the late fall, Traverse City Tourism did a digital influence report and then decided to take it to the next level and is now setting up their reputation management program, which is what you were just talking about, an automated tool for perfecting your listings syndication, for analytics, and for response to reviews. Similarly, Raleigh has done a light digital influence report and is looking at a Yext reputation-based management program. Many of you as listeners would have received what we call a DIR Lite, and that's something we did at Simpleview back in the late spring as part of the COVID assistance initiative. Is we took 100 operators at random from destinations across the country and prepared DIR Lite reports. So quite a few of you, I think there's 40 or 50 of you out there, will have had a DIR report. You've had it in your hands. That's a small subset of what your actual stakeholder base is, but it gives you an idea what the report looks like. And then, of course, you can go on to the next step in the discussion, which is, what do you want to do with that? Do you want to set up your own programs to engage members and stakeholders, or do you want to use this automated tool? Let's talk really specifically about the Simpleview reputation management tool, Alton. It's built on a platform called Yext that was licensed last year in Simpleview. Can you give us a fairly high level look at what it does and what it allows us to do?
Yeah, the reputation management tool is actually a really, really powerful piece of software that enables any destination to do a couple of key things for stakeholders. One, it enables something called listings management and listings accuracy. So we can take that core business information, your hours of operation, your address, the about me, the tag images, the menus if you're a restaurant, the amenities if you're a hotel, and we can syndicate that data across over 100 listings all over the internet at the push of the button, which essentially guarantees that the core data about any given business is accurate online, and that's super important because David and I we went mountain biking. Gosh, it must have been the beginning of the year now, like 8 months ago.
It was probably January while we were still allowed. While we were still out to travel,
still allowed to have fun. We went mountain biking in Sedona, and it must have been like early in the morning, second day of our trip. We just wanted to get some coffee. And we looked online. We looked on Google Maps to say, like, let's find a coffee shop. We don't want to go to Starbucks. And I think we stopped at like 2 or 3 different places that said online that they were open, and they weren't. And like, as a consumer, as a traveler, as tourists in that very time, that was so frustrating because I want to be able to just get good information. I want to know where to go. I don't want to waste my time. And I think those little impressions can have small negative impacts with big repercussions over time if you kind of think about it in a compounding sense. So I think enabling businesses to have just core listings data is one thing that's super important. Two, this tool offers something called reputation management or reviews management. So on all of these platforms, on TripAdvisor, on Facebook, on Google, people are reviewing these products and services all the time. You may do it if you're like a big reviewer. I'm more of a movie reviewer kind of guy, but there are people out there who just respond to restaurant reviews. They respond to reviews on Google. They want to engage and share their opinion. And a lot of the times, that may or may not be accurate. That may or may not be true. And they may be saying things that the individual business or you as destination marketers or managers may not agree with, but you can't really know that currently in a practical sense. If you think about it, managing 100 different businesses, 200 different businesses, reviews across, a dozen different key channels, that can be extremely heavy to do without the tools and resources to do so. So what this application provides, what this tool provides, is the ability for destination managers to actually look from a 50,000 foot perspective and see that all of their stakeholders are being reviewed like this on this channel. Here's the general sentiment, but also providing those businesses with an easy to use portal to respond to those reviews in person at any point in time. And statistics have shown that if you do engage with reviewers on a regular basis, not only is your aggregate review going to go up, which is going to play a big role in being found on Google Maps, like we talked about with Siri, like, hey Siri, what's the best place to eat? The higher your reviews are, with the higher number of reviews, the more likely you're going to rank on search locally, but also on other forms of search on Google Maps, etc. So that's the second big part. And the third is, I think, a really powerful resource, not just for the stakeholder, but for the destination organization as a whole. With this tool, you get some really serious analytics on the listings accuracy, or on the listings of their Google pages, on their Facebook pages, on how much traffic is being driven to those listing pages. So if you think of something like clicking the button when you're visiting a place for getting driving directions, that's an impression, that's a click that we can measure, and then we can aggregate in a portal in a really easy to understand format. So if you have a big convention, if you have a big event, if you have a big influx for a season, you can actually start to statistically look at how many people are clicking for driving directions to any given hotel, or to all of my hotels in any given region, or to these restaurants in this campaign, or for this group of businesses, and however you want to segment it. So it provides you with really valuable information as destination organizations to effectively understand how people are interacting with your stakeholders online, and then sharing and using that information however you see fit. So I think in summary, the reputation management tool provides the ability for listings management, for reviews management, and for marketing and in-depth intelligence and analytics in a single, easy to use platform.
So as a tourism marketer, my key takeaway from that, and the aha moment for me when I first saw the X tool, was this: the searchability of any business is completely affected by the consistency of its data. So in total layman's terms, if you're using 4 or 5 listings between your Google My Business listing, your TripAdvisor listing, your Foursquare listing, and your Yelp listing, and there is one error in one of those listings, then you will have a 25% failure rate in listings accuracy. And quite frankly, that will affect where you rank in the consumer search. And we all know it's so easy to have slight differences in listings. And you can imagine your operator, member, partner sitting home trying to run 7 channels. The X tool allows them to run those channels from one interface, run them with complete consistency, which in essence increases their searchability. And I don't want to go on about your favorite restaurant or chocolate chip pancakes, but as search becomes more sophisticated and we start looking for very specific things, consistent text-based search is going to be the key to getting found. So back, 10 years ago when we started this, all the fixes we did from the material we uncovered from the Digital Influence Report were manual. We would work with operators, set up teaching classes, have them go through and manage their various listing services. I was pretty excited when I heard about this automated reputation management tool.
Well, I think if you think about it from kind of like a really basic sense, that any organization is essentially just a group of people who have come together to achieve some purpose, right? Whether if you're in the corporate world to make widgets and services, but if you're in the destinations world, it's to increase the amount of tourism, to have a better impact of tourism in any given destination. And I think much more recently, what we're seeing, and we've seen this in a lot of the studies that you and I have talked about regularly, that tourism is becoming much more focused on sustainability, on having more community engagement, on being really informed with what the people who live in your destination actually want to see and to achieve. And so if you think about it from that perspective, this is really simply just a tool to help you achieve some of those goals about being more informed as marketers about what's going on in your destination. And you can leverage those to achieve your individual goals as a business or as an organization, however you see fit. It's another tool in the toolbox to help you future proof what it is you're doing moving forward. And I think that's really powerful.
Well, and just as we close this out, I will say this: from the perspective of destination management, over the past 10 years, if I've learned a couple lessons, it was what we stated off the top of this podcast. Engaging your stakeholders is the key to sustainable development. It's the key to partnerships that endure. It's the key to finding resources that aren't on the table if you go it alone as a DMO. And it is a necessary shift in a world that doesn't respond to classic placement style advertising. We're all searching now. We're all looking for answers. The tools give you a meaningful way to engage with your stakeholders that doesn't just highlight what they're doing, but actually improves their lot. And those improvements are legacy improvements. They stay in the community. They're always on. And if anything, COVID has taught us, it's this: we must help our stakeholders do business better. We rely on them doing business well, and anything we can do will be well received by them and embraced. I encourage you to follow up with us, shoot us an email, send an email to the podcast, anything you like. We'd be happy to talk to anyone about the future of tourism in terms of the digital influence report, in terms of the X reputation management tool. So thanks for listening. And Alton Wells, any closing words?
Yeah, I had one closing thought that I think is really important for anybody who would consider doing a digital influence report or taking it a step farther with reputation management, is that this tool, the services, they aren't meant to supplement or to take over current operations. They're not meant to replace your marketing. If anything, they're meant to support your marketing efforts. If anything, they're meant to provide you with better insight, with better engagement, with better resources, so that core function of being a destination marketer can be achieved using better data and better insights. And I think if you look at it not as something, oh, well, should we make a cost benefit analysis between doing this or this? I think the costs justify themselves, and I think the impact that this provides can really actually support those key objectives of marketing your destination. So if anything, it's a marketing tool, and I think that's important to state.
Well, and I think you touched on a really good point. It's a very cost-effective marketing tool. I think when you investigate pricing on these things, when we compare them to the six-figure campaigns we're used to doing, building alignment with your stakeholders and legacy value in your destination and making sure those shared community values are highlighted is remarkably cost effective.